acolo este, va fi corner, dragi ascultători.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Valverde, blah 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 blah, Star Trek. I'm joined again by human man and writing things,
Accurate.
Toby Venables, who's back for another episode. We're in the midst of a number of things. Now, bit of a shitter this, we're going to talk about Star Trek the Motion Picture. Yes, I know, Red Letter Media talks about Star Trek the Motion Picture recently and fuck it, we're doing it our own way. Particularly because I think, Toby, you wanted to talk about this one because it is a window to talk about the career of Robert Wise.
Robert Wise, yeah. One of my favourite filmmakers. Just because, you know, I think one of the things about Robert Wise is people think he's not an auteur. People, I've seen that actually argued that he's not an auteur because it's not a very distinct body of work and it's a bit too varied. And it's a bit, Well, I don't really agree. I agree that it is varied, but that maybe is why he hasn't got as much recognition, why he isn't such, a familiar name as some. But to me, there are really distinct things about him, and there are films that sort of cropped up in my sort of consciousness, in my life, in my experience, like The Day the Earth Stood Still, Andromeda Strain, and Star Trek: The Motion Picture. And there was a point at which I had no idea that they were all directed by the same person, and then found out that they were. And when I discovered that, it made total sense, really. And because there is a really clear connection.
Yeah.
And he also made Sound of Music and West Side Story.
And West Side Story, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. When you first, because I myself am also a big fan of Robert Wise and his films, and I think, like I just said before we went on camera, there's this kind of misconception that he was just some kind of hired gun. I think because of the diversity in his work, and when you actually look at it, there's this kind of really measured, kind of sort of somber stillness to it, and the mood it creates this kind of I think, did you say it was solemn or something like that a minute ago?
Yeah.
Kind of solemn mood, and so like. There's something, Duncan Rule, who recently guested on this show, not to be confused with Duncan Casey, he and I have had this thing for years talking about films that we jokingly say there's good boring and bad boring. And so I've been lukewarm on Motion Picture before compared to the others, and it's not my favourite Star Trek film. I do like 1 to 6 are my favourites, those are the original crew ones. All of them, I like all of them despite the various complaints. We always said that Star Trek the Motion Picture was good boring, and Andromeda Strain is good boring as well. It's this kind of still measured, kind of leaden thing. And even the Andromeda Strain and Motion Picture are two good ones to talk about in terms of their colour palettes, and I think it's partially reflective of the time, but it's so fucking beige. It's like beige and brown, and that's not an insult, but the Andromeda Strain is kind of white jumpsuits and beige walls. And then we once did a commentary podcast for Star Trek the Motion Picture, and I said that the crew look like a book of carpet samples because there's the Motion Picture uniforms, which I'm not mad about them. They're nice, but I'm not crazy about it. It's all a bit
and it's an interesting shift because when you look at the old series, the original series, what jumps out is the colour. The colours, not just the colours of the uniform, but the way colours,
the lights
are used. Not in every episode, but it's sometimes, in a good one.
Yeah,
the colours are really, really, really startling, and going back to those, I hadn't seen some of them in like years, and going back to some of those old series, old episodes, it's like, wow, this is really being, there's cinematography here, and there's really being directed. It's really being,
there's camera movement and lighting and stuff because again, it's sort of colour gels and things, but there's a classic episode called The Balance of Terror, which is the one about it's kind of the submarine combat one.
Yes.
And inside the Romulan ship, it's kind of reds and greens, and it's kind of dark.
The colours in that whole episode, in both those.
I got TNG actually, or The Next Generation, also did things with colour a lot. There's lots of kind of duality in its colours and things, and the TOS would often use kind of reds and blues to convey different moods, and sometimes it's flat and colourful, but when Kirk or Bones is going through a dilemma, they're sat in a dark corner with a blue light on them and stuff. And this film, it's got an eye, I think, on 2001. That's one of the things with it. Sure. It's kind of going for that kind of 2001 tone. And they didn't really know what they were doing with Star Trek at this point. It got cancelled after season 2. brought back for season 3, which was kind of quite derided and included the amazing episode Spock's Brain, which I unironically love. And they were developing a series called Star Trek Phase 2. And they went through various, there was Planet of the Titans and all these different, and I think they revisited City on the Edge of Forever as one of the concepts.
Yeah.
They ended up taking the pilot script for Star Trek Phase 2, so the characters of like Decker and Ilya, you know, bald. They took them directly from that script and put them in. And Decker is the son of the Captain Decker from Ilya. Yeah. He's son of Captain Decker from TOS. So, you know, they just kind of transported that and spun it out.
Yeah.
And the problem I have a little bit with Motion Picture, it is great and I love all first 1 to 6. Nothing really happens in it, but that does play into good boring. Because it's like this atmospheric nothing happens and you're not given the crew really, and most of the crew are not given a lot to do, the extended crew, and they're not really back in place till the end of the film. Yes. And the key relationship for me in Star Trek is Kirk, Spock and Bones, and it's fractured in this film. It's introduced as a fractured, strained relationship, and then they have to build it back up. You know? Yeah. And
it's interesting because it's sort of a bridge, really. It's like
sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's like the thing with the thing. Anyway, but it is a bit of a kind of bridge between the old series and the series of films proper, where it feels like, okay, the second Star Trek film, we've kind of arrived and we're kind of doing it now. And maybe it's like, you know, maybe it's like the Paul McGann Doctor Who movie, that it's kind of necessary to have that to get from there to there. And even though in some respects it is quite a shift. And then the way, but I think that mentioning the colour palette is quite interesting because it's such a shift. It's such a shift. And partly that is to do with, you know, just the advent of colour TV. Like colour TV was relatively new, so it's like, you know, let's use. Yeah. It's like when you look at The Wizard of Oz and you look at The Adventures of Robin Hood, sort of like late 30s, like colour in Hollywood in film was new, and my God, did they use it? It's like, you know, retina burning colours. The Adventures of Robin Hood. It's a beautiful film, fantastic, but the colours are really, really strong. And to some extent, that's kind of what, you know, Star Trek original series was doing. It's like, we've got colour, so let's have, you know, red, blue, you know, all these sort of different coloured uniforms. The decision to kind of ditch all that, to be really dark. There's a lot of just dark.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of black.
Yeah. It really inky.
A lot of space. Which I know should be obvious, but
Spock turns up in the black kind of pajamas and stuff when he comes from his Kolinar and everything. Like
he's done the Luke Skywalker thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and a weird kind of Mickey Dolenz haircut.
I'm sorry, I mentioned Luke Skywalker. Sorry. I mean in the original films. But
I will take this opportunity to make a correction that I said ILM did the effects for this last time when we talked about Star Wars. It's actually Douglas Trumbull, and I was corrected. I was rightly corrected, but they did do like 2 onwards. But hey ho, there you go.
So much of it is about those effects. And as someone tweeted just the other day about someone who was watching Star Trek the movie, saying every film like this should have a 20-minute sequence in which you have lingering shots of the starship from every possible angle.
It was a really big deal as well because it was the model was refitted and redesigned, so the warp nacelles are different and stuff like that. But it was revealing it on film was a really big deal for everyone involved, and they tread it as such. And during the Star Wars video, you know, you did make that point that in Star Trek, when a kind of technological thing like a ship or a base is revealed, it's a big, grand, sweeping, lovely thing, and that's the same. The build up to seeing the Enterprise again, and you know, there's an element of audience surrogacy in that Kirk's an admiral, and he hasn't been on the ship for a while, so it's being reintroduced to him, you know, and it's the know, it's a character moment. Because I think he's in the pod with he's in the shuttle with Scotty, isn't he?
Scotty takes him around.
Yeah,
it goes on for ages. Really, but actually.
It's like an Oculus Rift demo, isn't it? It's just like around.
I mean, it's impossible to say how that would play now. Well, no, it isn't. I suppose you could just play it to an audience who'd never seen it or heard of it. But because it's cinema, because it's big, because it's and it's not just the screen that's got bigger. It's like there's the whole scale of the way they can show things has sort of gone up, several notches. But also it's just showing off special effects.
Yeah, really great ones.
It is. But also I think there's a bit at the beginning of Master and Commander, which is not a science fiction film, I know, and it takes place in sort of 1805, I think the film is set in, and it's a ship. So it is a ship, and there are many, many references to that period of
seafaring.
Seafaring. Thank you for saving me there. Seafaring. There are many, many references to that, and it's like in Enterprise is a ship. It's a she. It's sort of all that sort of stuff, and he kind of. There's a hornblower kind of.
Well, they really lean into that in Star Trek 2 specifically.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And well, this is maybe just a sort of real kind of like shoehorn way of doing this, but the way that film starts is it just takes you around Aubrey's ship, Master and Commander, to establish like this is the reality of this environment. This is the reality of this world that we're going to be in. And it kind of grounds the whole thing. It explains visually, without a word being uttered, but it sort of grounds it in, you see all the details of it. And to an extent, I feel like that's exactly what that is doing. It's kind of like saying, you remember the Enterprise? You remember it looked a bit like it was sort of, it's sort of moving like this. Well, now it's real. Look.
And I think Robert Wise lends it that. I think he understands that and lends it that gravity and that kind of spectacle. I think it takes a named director like that to do that, and because it is, it's all those ship reveals are good boring, which I think I might trademark, but they're all good boring. They're these nice, because I was saying before, like a Robert Wise film, it makes me kind of sink into my chair and I'm just sort of along for the ride. I just sort of let them wash over me. I really love that mood he creates, and he does it here. It just kind of feels like, nothing really happens, and they sort of drive to the place, and then the stuff happens, and then it's over, and it's kind of frustrating. And I think this is, it's kind of maybe misunderstood on this level, but it's frustrating because it doesn't give you the crew. It's all kind of fractious, and they come back together at the end, and there's satisfaction in seeing that. Because Star Trek the series was often quite fun, and it was quite jokey.
Yes.
And the running gag with Chekhov about like the little old lady from Leningrad or whatever, this and that and the other, and you often get those kind of like ends.
Yeah, they're all clustered around the chair, like,
Yeah. So it's definitely not light-hearted. I mean, but then again, it is a step up to a film, and it does deal with like death and loss and. I think kind of broken relationships and loss are the kind of key thing here. Because like Decker and Ilya, that's a kind of fractured relationship, and Kirk, Spock and Bones is kind of broken. And Spock, having been doing Kolinar, he's just not Spock. And it's not till at the end when he kind of realises, he remembers experiencing emotion again, having purged it from himself, it all comes back to him.
But that's kind of meta as well, because there's the whole thing of like, is Leonard Nimoy going to be involved in any of this? And kind of him not really wanting to be involved, and then maybe being involved, and all of that. So it's like, I'm always sort of fascinated by actors who play characters over a long period of time, and how they kind of, their personalities start to feed in to the writing of the character, and there's this sort of feedback loop that you get, which definitely happened a lot with Next Generation.
Massively. Well, Sigourney Weaver executive producing the Alien films, as an example. But yeah, TNG, Frakes directed movies and stuff, and he wanted to direct Star Trek Beyond. LeVar Burton directed a bunch of stuff. Tim Russ, Tuvok from Voyager, he not only directed a ton of stuff, but was involved in fan films as well. And they all wrote. I think they all wrote novels. Like Shatner wrote Star Trek novels and stuff like that. Star Trek kind of brings you in.
Yeah. And I think as Kirk got older, he definitely got more like William Shatner, which is not necessarily an entirely good thing.
Yeah, right.
Because I mean, like his death scene. I was trying to think of another way to say it, but like, you know, he's a fictional character. Why am I worrying? It's his death scene, like in Generations. It's just like
it's completely awful. It's completely everything about that is completely awful, and I hate it.
That's it.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Seriously.
It's Captain fucking Kirk, man. Like,
it's like no. Well, maybe. But no, that's not it. Well, it may have been fun, but that is not what...
The Kirk we get here is kind of a dour Kirk. And he sort of, in the subsequent films, he kind of comes back out of himself again. But then he has to, like, he finds his lost love and the son he didn't know about, who's then taken away from him. And he gets to do some really great dramatic stuff. In Star Trek V, it's all about Shatner's ego again. Because, like, the entity fools everyone apart from Kirk. And Brad has his favourite moment that he always talks about Star Trek 5, and he's like, "Excuse me, what does God need with a starship?" And he's like, he's the only one who gets it because he wrote and directed it, and he's amazing.
I quite like it.
Oh no! Now, way off topic, right? I will defend Star Trek 5 to the fucking death, and everybody hates it. It is absolutely okay. It's not the best script. It's full of really interesting camera movement. The whole film feels alive. It's colourful, and the crew all get to shine in it, and they all interact. I think Star Trek 5 is fantastic.
I sort of avoided it for a while because everyone was saying it was like this terrible thing. And then I saw it and thought, I felt guilty. I felt guilty for liking it, and I thought, well, okay, so maybe it is, you know, that meta thing. Maybe it is about Shatner's ego, but actually, if anyone's going to spot it, it's going to be Kirk, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's
true,
going to be Kirk.
true.
It should be Kirk. Because what I love about it is that, and why it's so important that trio of characters, why it's so important they come back together, is because you've got Bones, who's all, even though he's a scientist, because he's a doctor, he's all emotion, he's all heart. And there's Spock, who's all brain, and you know, no emotion except there is. And then in between, there's Kirk, who has to synthesize all of that and bring this kind of instinctive...
Well, they're like an id ego and super ego, aren't they? It's the kind of Freudian...
It's kind of, I feel like it's his role is to sort of like those two characters are never going to see eye to eye, except via Kirk.
Yeah,
it's only
he's the lens.
It is like the 3 points of the triangle.
That's the relationship this film capitalizes on.
Yeah,
and it's about bringing those three back together.
Yeah,
and there are some great visual treatments of that. And I mentioned this to you earlier. There's a bit where I think it's something. Kirk comes back as an admiral. He hates being an admiral, and he takes it out on Decker. And he also kind of, you know, proverbially slaps his dick in Decker's face and takes the captaincy off him. Sorry.
Just had a mental image.
Powerful image there of Shatner.
We're slightly at odds with the rest of the film.
Yeah, it's not really a Robert Wise thing, is it? And Bones kind of says, like, you know, it's not a problem with him, with Decker, it's a problem with you. And I can't remember what happens, but that you're left with the shot of Shatner standing alone, or Kirk standing alone in his office. And these kind of frosted, or kind of darkened glass doors close, and then you're left for a lingering shot of Kirk just as a black outline. And this is a film that really, quite a lot. I mean, the second film deals a lot with his inability to face up to the fact that he won't always win. The first film really hones in on his negative personality traits. It's really a look at kind of him being kind of jealous, bitter, sad, you know, not in control. Whereas before he was always, you know, Kirk, he used to get possessed or whatever, but he was always came out on top. And
also, it's about him not being young anymore. Yeah. It's about the fact that, you know, time has passed. So it actually, one of the things I like about it, that it makes it harder work, because I'm sure lots of people kind of want it to just carry on where it left off, and it's like everything's, you know, back the way it was. And it doesn't do that. It's like, no, we've got to get back to that point, and we need to see that happening, and because all these characters are older, and they will, you know, time has passed, and they haven't just been waiting to do this, which is true. Well, I was going to say it's true of the actors as well. I think
to a degree,
some of them have been waiting to do this.
Yeah,
not Leonard Nimoy, but and it's kind of, and actually the whole film series to some extent becomes about getting older and dealing with that and having to, not be, Kirk isn't the young, dashing captain, that sort of like Errol Flynn character that he is in those episodes in a brilliant way. And you kind of think, I totally get why this quite young man has is in this position of responsibility, because he's brilliant. He doesn't know as much as Spock. He's not maybe as kind of, he can't do what McCoy does.
Oh, he's not as worldly or as wise as McCoy, but he's not as smart as Spock.
But he's just got this instinct, this intuitive thing that he can just turn. Well, the Kobayashi Maru kind of, he can turn something that is impossible into a possibility. He can make a possibility.
Yeah.
And so it's really about it. The whole film is about those three characters and those three characters coming back together. Even though it seems like there are all these distractions of all these other characters who we kind of.
Well, the rest. This is one of the things. The rest of the crew gets such a short shrift in this film. Whereas they're given stuff to do a lot more in the others. But like they're barely there. Yeah. And it is an ensemble, it really should. That's one of the flaws with it. It doesn't recognise enough that it's a kind of ensemble. What it does do, crucially, is that it recognises that if you disrupt that trio, everything falls to pieces. So it busies itself with showing that fractured and rebuilding it. Yeah. And again, you're kind of given that at the end. Because I love who Bones turns up all like he's been up all night doing blow at Studio 54. It's like the beard and the medallion and stuff.
Yeah.
And he's still all grumpy and shit. And then Spock comes. They both are introduced in unfamiliar ways. They go, Bones and Spock just come out, and it's just kind of like, oh wow. And then they kind of debate and stuff like that. And a lot of it is spectacle and effects driven, and they do the kind of 2001 light tunnel thing. And the scenes of this is look, I know how puerile I am, and I can't help it. All right, it's just the way I am. But when a film keeps straight-facedly using the word orifice, what am I supposed to do with that? And then the way that the orifice is shaped and stuff, it's like, Spock's entering the orifice. Excellent, fantastic. I'm not going to laugh at all. Cool spacesuit though as well. I like the spacesuit that he's in. It's cool design and stuff, and the stuff inside.
That would definitely work.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the thing. I mean, in Star Trek, things look like they would work, and which is, and actually talking about the technology, and that is another aspect of it, but not just technology in general. It's, I think what Robert Wise got was that it's at its heart, it's about those three characters and the ship itself. Yeah. And that, so there is, talking about those lingering shots of the ship where it's like, it just goes on, and I don't mind. It really is about that ship, and that ship is the emotional kind of like, it's home. It is home. That connection with Master and Commander, it's their home. And actually, when you see it, we were talking about it earlier, when you see the Enterprise destroyed, when Kirk does, later does that sort of switch and tricks Doc Brown.
Yeah.
Klingon.
Christopher Lloyd Klingon, can't remember his name.
But it involves destroying the Enterprise. And that is one of the most emotional moments in the entire series for me. It's vying with the death of Spock.
Oh God, don't, Jesus!
It's vying with that, but it's just
just a model. It's the death of a character.
It's only a model, but
it's only a model.
And yet he looks up and he says, "My God, Bones, what have I done?" And Bones says, "What you've always done." Turned. What is it?
I can't remember the exact line, but
basically turned a situation where there's no chance into a chance to survive.
Yeah.
Which absolutely is what he does.
And then that character is absent. If you can consider the Enterprise a character, the character is absent for all of Star Trek 4. So
and it shows that it can still work. It shows that
it's about that team and those people.
But you still want it to get back. I mean, and the fact that they have him flying around in a Klingon ship, it's like, this feels all dirty and wrong.
Yeah. I love that. Well, that digressing for a moment back to the motion picture. I think I feel like it's designed to hinge on a twist, which isn't that good, and is quite signposted. It's cool. I like the concept. So, the Earth Voyager probe has been, kind of intercepted by some kind of machine consciousness that have interpreted its instructions to go and find the creator. Carbon units, find the creator, which is man. Vija. It's kind of like in Red Dwarf when he finds the rubbish pod and he thinks it's alien writing because it's all scorched off. It's like the Vija thing is fused together. It's cool. It's a cool concept. But I gotta say, the first time I watched Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which was a really long time ago, when it come to that, it was like, cool. There's no sort of like, it's just kind of cool. It's cool and it's fine, but it's not that interesting. And it's played as this big reveal, because I suppose the Voyager probe was a reasonably recent thing when this film came out. You know? So that was kind of, I suppose it's kind of vaguely topical. I'm not sure when it was launched, but it was more in the recent memory than it is now. It's just not a very interesting twist, and I'm not sure who was responsible for that or whatever. And the main thing is the character stuff.
Yeah.
But I just don't find it that exciting. The visuals are amazing when they go find the probe inside the orifice and stuff, and the way it's all lit. I mean, again, this film is a visual treat, but as a piece of storytelling, I'm unconvinced.
Yeah. I mean, and Robert Wise has that very, very sort of cool eye and cool presentation, where, and maybe it needs to move on from that. Like, he's not the right director to have directed the whole series of movies.
Sure.
But that change of, it's like the change of color palette, the change of tone, the fact that in that film it's not lots of fun. It's about scale. It's about scaling it up. It's a film which is scaling the thing up, and it's about scale. So it's kind of like, in a way, it's sort of like, okay, this is the manifesto. This isn't quite it yet, and like you say, it's only like, they're only all assembled really at the end. It's like setting up the circumstances for the next series to begin in a way, and I really love it as a thing in itself. But talking about hardware, Christ on a bike. I mean that, like when they're flying over the probe itself. How long does that go on for?
Yeah, it's long. It's like the fight and they live.
It's astonishing, and it's like, and it shows the sense of scale. Like the Enterprise is like this big, and it's just one bit of the probe which is like filling the screen. And wow.
Yeah, in terms of spectacle and design and visuals, it's wonderful. And this is the thing, I'm not mad about it, but I do like it. And as an island and as a standalone thing, it's great. It's perhaps it's simultaneously not Star Trek enough and way too Star Trek at the same time. It's kind of a stumble, and I kind of think they really hit their stride in the trilogy of 2, 3, and 4 is where it's at for me. In fact, I might have to flick one on later tonight. Now we've had this discussion, but it works as its own thing, and it's kind of still, and it's kind of Robert Wisey. But I like that. I like Robert Wise's style, as I say, and I don't mean to damn with faint praise in any way. I legitimately love his kind of slow, still way of doing things, and that's what he brought to this. Was he necessarily the best choice? I don't know. But they kind of course corrected with the next one, so whatever.
I think it's always going to be different, and it's always going to be difficult for that reason. But I think it was good that it didn't just pick up where it left off as if nothing had happened. I thought it was good that it was trying to deal with time having passed and this sort of alienation of, because Starfleet, it's all about togetherness, it's all about working together, and we've sorted out the future, don't need money, don't need this, it's like we're all sorted, let's see what's out there. And suddenly it's not sorted, and it needs to be sorted out again.
Yeah.
And it's a bigger world, it's a more complex world, it's a more psychologically difficult world. But I think he got the fact that it's like those three characters and the ship, and that are really key to the whole thing. And it's like, okay, some other things maybe didn't work as well as they could, but that's true. It's always been true of Star Trek, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's true.
Some episodes are like, yeah, skip that one.
Yeah, I've been particularly watching TOS. It's kind of like, how many planets do they go to where everyone's just decided to be Nazis?
They had a lot of uniforms that they could.
They had a lot lying around, and it's made for some very entertaining GIFs. And actually, Star Trek TOS and animated series are just a mine of good gifs. There are so many quality Star Trek gifs.
Swear Trek.
Love Swear Trek. I just bigged up Swear Trek on the podcast we just did. Also, and I'll do this again because they're things I really love. There's a channel called Trexpertise. You ever watch Trexpertise?
No, I haven't.
Really fantastic, really great kind of deep dives that they'll take a thing from Star Trek and use that to explore wider stuff.
Nice.
In kind of half-hour bites. A guy called Kyle does that. I have been in touch with him briefly. That's a much bigger, better channel than this one. And also Junkball Media. And Junkball Media do they do deep dives on he does deep dives on the individual ship designs in universe and in the real world, and he's quite sarcastic and deadpan.
Good.
And they're really entertaining.
Like
so if you're, I don't really watch Trek Yards. I understand Trek Yards is quite good. I should check it out. But those are my kind of picks for Star Trek stuff. For those of you who are still here.
Just one last thing on Robert Wise, actually, just more generally, that film that we haven't mentioned, The Haunting.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah. Well, I referenced that in the thing review.
Which, because of The Haunting of Hill House, the recent TV series, obviously that...
Is that an adaptation of The Haunting? I don't know anything about it. Everyone's talking about it.
The Haunting of Hill House, the Shirley Jackson, your...
My mum.
Yeah. Shirley Jackson novel was adapted into The Haunting, the Robert Wise film.
Right. Okay.
And it's a great film where it's very psychological and it's very, it's not funny.
Well, The Haunting is really minimal.
Yeah.
And that's why it's terrifying.
Yeah,
Because the remake has got like a CGI staircase or some crap. But like the stuff, and it's the thing I referenced in the thing review, it's when the door just like swells and there's all these infernal noises. And again, Robert Wise, one locked off shot, wide, really still, of just all this sound design and this like rubber door. It's terrifying. And you see nothing in The Haunting. It's all... Yeah, amazing piece of filmmaking. I'm surprised that flew past me in this discussion.
But The Haunting of Hill House, the Netflix series, is a really interesting hybrid because it's not adapting the book. It's like another group of people who are connected with the house later. So it's all about the house, but the house looks exactly like the house in the film. So like the spiral staircase and the statues and so on. So just wanted to mention that film because we hadn't sort of mentioned it in this chat.
That was you were right to. That was very remiss, I think.
And also because it connects with something that's sort of like recent. So.
Well, again, talking about Robert Wise, horror, science fiction, comedy, musical. He could just do anything. It's incredible, really. I mean, it's not many, because, another person I could think of who just did whatever he wanted was Stanley Kubrick. Horror, comedy, war, sci-fi-ish, sci-fi and, speculative stuff. He just kind of casually just did it. And so did Robert Wise. So there you go, all done. Star Trek, that motion picture. It's a good film, go check it out if you haven't. And Toby and I will be back with stuff, I guess. Goodbye. Support your 7th or 8th favourite YouTube channel by buying crap, tat, junk, hogwash and filth at redbubble.com/people/Valverde shop.